Thank you for joining us. We know that hundreds of people all across the country are watching this live stream. Welcome to the Feminist Organizing School. This has been an amazing experience, and we're so happy that you are here joining 60 grassroots feminists and non-gender binary folks that are here doing a deep dive on feminist economics, on gender and sexuality, on organizing on a feminist lens. And we are so proud and happy to be here with our sister all the way from Kenya. Yes. Sophie Ogutu. Everyone give it up. So for folks who are watching this live stream, we are asking you to make comments on live stream and converse with each other via the comments in the video. And if they want to listen, if you want to listen, we have, since GGJ is very committed to multilingual justice, we have interpretation that we will be putting the call-in number in the description of the video, but here it is. So también tenemos interpretación al español para nuestras compañeros y compañeras que quieren oír esta presentación. La llamada va a ser en español, so tiene que llamar, y el teléfono es 515-739-1015. Otra vez, 515-739-1015, y el código, está largo, el código 420-986-994 y las hashtag. Okay, so count. So otra vez el código 420-986-994 para la llamada en español, para la interpretación. So puede ver el video, pero también puedes llamar para que oiga la interpretación fabulosa de nuestros compañeros y compañeras que nos están interpretando aquí en esta escuela feminista y organizadora. So we are very excited that you're joining us at this Feminist Organizing School. The school is an opportunity to further develop our understanding of grassroots feminism and gender justice. We've been engaging with feminist economies, economics, and encouraging the incorporation of a feminist agenda across our numerous frontline struggles. And many of our members are here particularly interested in the history. We've been delving into the history and the theoretical foundations of women of color feminisms, but also how our social movements can be strengthened through that gender justice and feminist lens. Some of the goals of our school are to deepen the understanding of patriarchy and its connections to white supremacy, colonialism, capitalism, transphobia, and homophobia. We're here also analyzing the current political conditions of the global and national right-wing surge and the implications for women, gender non-conforming folks, and children. And we want to be able to develop, and this is part of the training, this live stream is the training, to talk about what is the World March of Women, learn about a global feminist movement, and how to continue to reclaim feminisms and gender justice at the grassroots. And we want to introduce, we've spent the last couple days really talking about how to really understand capitalism and how we're going to dismantle, right, these systems of oppression and think about those feminist economies, that feminist values that I think we've all come to the conclusion, right, is going to save the world, right, and humanity. So, and we want to reflect on our work, how to strengthen this feminist analysis within our work, because we understand that this is also a tool to everyone's liberation. And then the last thing is really building with each other. We've been building here and bonding, doing deep training, deep debate, deep dialogue. There's been tears, there's been laughter, and there's been a lot of fun, and there's been a lot of rigorous questioning and interrogation, and we've also been learning from each other. And so I think that this space has been a real important space for us to be able to be building this, common solidarity, but also knowing that we got a lot of work to do out there. So like I said, there's 60 working class women and non-binary folks here developing critical consciousness on how to organize with a feminist lens. So Sophie, I want to introduce my compañera, Sophie Ogutu, who is all the way here with us as a guest, as a sister in struggle, representing the International Committee of the World March of Women. Welcome, let's give it up for Sophie. So, Sophie, what do you think about the feminist organizing school so far?
Oh my God, I think there's so much that's been going on. The feminist school has been amazing. I've learned so much actually. I thought that I knew so much, but coming to this space and meeting all these grassroots women and all that came up, I'm thinking that I'm taking so much with me from methodology, how the feminist school took place, the content, and I really love how we dismantling and naming the enemies and how we dismantling patriarchy. I think this was amazing. It's a space, it's something that any feminist anywhere would want to be part of. So I'm really grateful and I really love the energy that all of you sisters brought along.
Well, we are so excited that you're here with us, spending time with us from away from your home, away from your struggle. But I think that having you here has enriched us very deeply. And so, when did you first identify as a feminist?
I come from Africa. And in Africa, it's very difficult to say I'm a feminist. Because many times, there are very many notions and misconceptions about feminism, especially in Africa. And people tell you, you want to bring us the white women ideas in our villages, in our grassroots communities. So for me, it was very difficult at first, but I was very excited when I joined the World March of Women space, where we found lots of women talking about issues, of talking about themselves, talking about feminism, the same thing that people do every day. And it took me very little time to realize that I think every woman is a feminist. Because it took me back to looking even at what my grandmother used to do. Because looking at women, I don't think I can sit back like this when another woman, whether I know her or not, is in problem. So I think that feminism starts from there. It starts from within yourself and understanding and identifying who you are. So I identified as a feminist without buts, without however, in the year 2007. And I really love that we were part of the women who joined the World Social Forum as participants. We only joined the World Social Forum as participants. This was the 7th World Social Forum in Nairobi. And World March of Women came in as one of the social movements, because this is a very open space where social movements meet. And that is how I joined, and I was part of the workshops, and then I realized I'm actually a feminist, and I should be a proud one, because there was so much that happened. Yeah, and I think when I identified and realized that actually I'm a feminist, I've never looked back. It's a journey that we have to walk, because every woman is a feminist. All you need to do is just identify that you're one. That is what it really is. Because I still have issues, you know. Many times you introduce yourself and you say, people ask you, where are you from? I say, from the World March of Women. What is it? It's a grassroots international feminist action movement. Feminist, you know, underline it. Why? Because there are very many misconceptions and very many notions out there, and a lot of people will be afraid. You know, they look at feminism as those women who don't get married, those women who fight men, those women who are just out there looking for helmets and ideas, which is not true. So it actually starts from within. And my within, I realized it in January 2007.
That's an amazing story. And that's really interesting that you talk about the misconceptions and almost forcing of coming out and being able to be so proud to talk about yourself as a feminist, despite all of the messages that we're getting from our families, our communities, from society about what that means. So I remember when I first met you, and so Grassroots Global Justice also met the World March of Women at the World Social Forum. And I feel that that played a very important role in our political development as Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. Because we saw, I think I remember seeing the World March of Women marching in the streets, and there was like thousands of women, all in purple, and chanting and singing and running and doing formations on the street and drumming and blowing fire and all this stuff. And I was like, wow, who are these women? Who is this movement? And I think that the World March of Women began to court us to become members of the World March of Women, because they had talked about that within the United States, they didn't have a national chapter. And so we at first hesitated, and we're like, we love the World March of Women. We align with you. We're so inspired by you. We feel a lot of synergy with the World March of Women, but we are a mixed-gendered, multiracial, multi-sectoral alliance here in the U.S. that does work at the intersections of anti-war, anti-militarization, climate and environmental justice, and economy for the people and the planet. And so we said, even though we do work around those areas, we don't necessarily, if a lot of us individually consider ourselves feminists, we have a lot of feminist practice within the organization, within our leadership, but we don't see ourselves necessarily as part of the women's movement. And so we pushed back for many years on the World March of Women. But you all were organizers, and you guys kept on asking, crunching us for our commitment, and basically they said, why don't you come to Sao Paulo and come and to the international gathering in 2014, and Maria Poblet, the former director of Causa Justa and Just Cause, she was a member of the GGJ coordinating committee, we went together to Sao Paulo. And the minute that we got there to the 8-day meeting, so we oftentimes complain about a 2-day meeting, the World March of Women was an 8-day meeting, and we got to Sao Paulo, and Maria, it was the opening march, and we got to Sao Paulo, and Maria and I looked at each other, we're like, we have died and gone to revolutionary women's heaven. If the world looks like this and acts like this is where we want to be. And so that is where I remember first meeting you, Sophie. And I remember meeting you, and the convening was over 1,500 women. Over 1,500 women, and they were women from the Amazonia, indigenous women from the Amazons, leaders of the CUT, which is the Central Única de Trabajadores, which is the AFL-CIO of Latin America. They had their women's wing that are members of the World March of Women, students, feminists, LGBT folks, all of women, fisher women, all these women, trade unionists, all there, and all members of this global movement. And for me, that was a real important turning point for us considering beginning to do the work of growing the World March of Women work here in the United States. So, Sophie, when I met you, you were being nominated to be part of the international committee. So tell us a little bit about that experience in Sao Paulo and how you got into the leadership of the World March of Women.
It's amazing how you say it, because when we started, we from Kenya, we work from very, very local and grassroots, not anywhere near here. But when we joined the World March of Women in 2007, later on that year is when we met, actually, just a few months later on, because then I think the World March of Women identifies and looks at how do we connect organizations, groups, and individuals who are working towards two things: addressing poverty, the root causes of poverty, and the elimination of violence against women. Those are the basics of the World March of Women. And of the women groups that we were with, like we had numerous, a huge number of women who went to the World Social Forum space. And maybe something that I've never shared, it would be very good to share here, because the World Social
on
Forum,
Facebook live stream.
that's okay, it was very nice. You know, the social movements who've been members and part of this process of the World Social Forum know that the World Social Forum is an open space where movements join, they interact, they share, they seek alternatives, and they create together, they build together. And it's usually supposed to be it's not a money-making space. But in Nairobi, unfortunately, it was a little bit expensive, and the grassroots women could not join. They could not be part of it. And the World March of Women felt that this space, this opportunity cannot just happen and go like that without the grassroots women in Nairobi, because the World March of Women is a grassroots women's movement. And we mobilized the women from different areas and were connected, and they came in the space. And there was a lot of, how are we getting into this space? What are we going to discuss? That's exactly what I felt when I first went to Vigo for the World March of Women meeting. When I was invited and told, okay, you did a very good mobilization, now we want you to come so that you can start connecting, so that you can come and connect with the global struggle, so that see how we can bridge up our local struggles with the international. And that's exactly the feeling that I felt that the women felt when they were coming to the World Social Forum space. And when I was there, I was surprised that my name came up for nomination at the International Committee, not because of anything, but it is because of the connections. We need to see how we connect. And World March of Women is very, the International Committee is actually the political space of the World March of Women, where discussions happen at international meetings, and which happens every 2 years. So it was, for me, no, this is too much for me. How am I going to fit in and get in and move with the spirit? And looking at all those women with the vibrancy and the energies around us, saying, no, we cannot get there. We cannot get there. So for me, that was the experience there. But I think because, again, of the autonomous, and how World March of Women is, it gives us that opportunity to organize ourselves as grassroots women, because we organize as national coordinating bodies. So my country is a national coordinating body within the World March of Women. So that's how we organize. And when I was told you don't have to be here all the time, you organize from where you are, I thought, okay, then this is now what we can do. And that's how it went. So that was really the feeling.
That's right. And so can you talk a little bit about how the World March of Women organizes itself, right, in terms of regions? Because part of what is so inspiring is that there is representation, right, in terms of numbers of national bodies across the world and territories, and how it is organized. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, World March of Women, we are privileged to be in all the regions of the world, in Africa, Asia, Americas, Europe, and the Arab world. And the representation, the World March of Women is very careful about regional representation, and every voice has to be brought in the space. And so the International Committee is composed of representatives from two representatives from each region. Like in Africa, there are two representatives. I'm one of those two representatives representing Africa in the International Committee. In Asia, we have two representatives. In Uruguay, we have 2 representatives, and we look very, very keenly at regional balance. In Europe, in Americas, we have 2 representatives. So that gives us the opportunity to really bring the diverse voices within that space. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we're going to pause right now for folks. Welcome to folks on the live stream. You've joined the Feminist Organizing School here. We're at Kendall Hill, a little bit outside of Philadelphia. I'm going to do a small pause because we are translating and interpreting this call simultaneously. And so for our interpreters, I'm going to take a short pause. So, Sophie, as we were talking about the World March of Women, can you talk to us about the politics? Can you talk to us about the politics of the World March of Women and why the World March of Women has the politics it has?
World March of Women is a movement. It's a permanent movement, actually, that is anti-patriarchal. We are anti-colonialist, anti-imperialist. And as we've been working all this, I'm very happy that we're talking about all this after going through the first lessons and through the feminist organizing school. So now we know where, and the reason why it is very important for us is because we've looked at patriarchy actually. Patriarchy being the system that is feeding these other systems. Without patriarchy, colonialism is weak. Without patriarchy, imperialism is weak. But patriarchy is the same problem that it's because of patriarchy that women suffer most. So for us, it's very, very important. The World March of Women looks at all these. And we organize in 4 action areas. One is common good, women having access to, and access and right to. Because sometimes having access and without the right, then if we say we want women to have access to land, and you have access to land but you don't have a right to use the land, it's of no good. The second one is violence against women. Violence against women is the reason why this movement actually came up, and strongly. Way back in 1995, when the movement was started, it started as a response against violence and poverty. And one of the issues that we really must think is that violence, we've seen how violence against women is used to silence the woman everywhere, at the workplace, at home. At home where the woman is actually supposed to be the head of the house. When we look at all that we do, we've been discussing here, then you know that we don't. But people will use violence. A lot of people can use violence to bring down. So it's very important to World March of Women to discuss, because the women who are part of the movement are the ones who are actually suffering the same. The third one is women and work. We look at women and work. It is very, very important. We've been discussing here the issues of women and work. Women working, paid and paid work, all this. So it's very, very important to World March of Women. And I'm happy that we took that up really, because a lot of grassroots women are made to feel that if you're not going out there to work in an office while you're driving or with high heels or something, then you're not working. But in real sense, these women are really working. And we know that without women's work, then nothing can happen. So for us, it is very, very important. And the third one is
war and
militarization and militarization and peace and militarization. We are looking at peace actually, because we know that when there's war anywhere, the first people who suffer are women. Women and children. Because a woman will never run away and leave a child and say, I'll come back for you. But a man would run away anywhere. So for us, we're thinking that with the military, and we're seeing a lot of militarism right now around the world, which is actually bringing so many people down. and a lot of people are suffering. So for us, it's very important that we feminists can actually start organizing and thinking through about these 4 action areas, which are very, very important within the spaces that we gather together to organize.
Did you talk about public services and common good?
Yes, because, you know, and public services and common good is also one thing that is very important. We are looking at access to water, hospitals. Who are these people who are taking, you know? And I like the way we were talking about women taking charge of nature, because then it's the woman who starts. The first person who's in touch with nature is the woman, yeah? And children are born of water, like we've been hearing all the time. The child survives in water, and that water is in the woman. And if we, you know, but many times we find that even access to the water that we have that's supposed to be natural, it's out here for everyone, a lot of women cannot access it. So for us, it's very important that we discuss all this and address them as feminists around the world.
So I remember when the debate was happening around these 4 action camps. And like I said, when we went to Sao Paulo, the meeting was 8 days. There was political education, like deep political education. There was actions. There was multiple actions that happened. There was the international meeting in which we were just trying to get unity. And we were there as observers. Women were trying to debate around these 4 action camps. And I think the question that I have for you is, so people work in the World March of Women at the grassroots level, and they work on all sorts of issues. But I think, can you explain to us, because our movement sometimes here in the United States, we may agree to some things, but we're not always coherent, right? We don't always like say, these are the 4 areas that we really believe, or this is our political grounding and articulation. And I think that's part of where we need to be learning from international social movements. But can you talk about how people apply the politics of the World March of Women, and then these 4 action camps within the national body, but more importantly within the local work. And to remind folks who are joining us on the live stream, and also the participants of the Feminist Organizing School, the 4 action camps are around violence against women, peace and demilitarization, the demand for public services and common good, and women's economic autonomy and work, right? And so those are 4 categories, and for folks who are interested on the live stream to read more about this, you can go to the World March of Women website and download. Actually, each of those has 2 pages. There's a very theoretical and practical analysis about those 4 action camps, and we've read them as the participants in the Feminist Organizing School. But I think my question to you, as we begin to think about the theory and the frameworks, how do we take it to the practice? Today we've spent all day talking about organizing with a feminist lens, but the question is, how do these action camps apply in the local work?
Well, much of women, actually, as much as it's very, very autonomous, but we also have, I think, very strategic calendar dates that enables sisters around the world to do actions and to always remind us that it is important to carry out this in the local, you know, when we are globalizing our struggles and imagining, you know, that many times people think, okay, it's only women in Africa or Asia who are suffering, who are, you know, it's only in these regions where we have the homeless. But when you put the voices of women together, you find that the struggles are really actually the same, and maybe worse in other places. So the World March of Women, through the very strategic calendar dates, women are able to organize around, and many times it happens like this. So we have 3 very important dates which run throughout the year. Many other dates can follow, actions can be done, but because we are an action movement that's doing things all the time. So this is the International Women's Day, the 8th of March is very important to us as a women's movement. And we do actions, looking at the 4 action areas, and we localize things according to the demands and the realities of the context at which we live in. The second one is 24th of April. It's a very strategic date for us. And during this school, we had, we actually saw very nice skits on the Rana Plaza. I want to tell you that one of the very, very important things that we discussed, that all the NCBs around the world,
National coordinating bodies.
all the national coordinates, sorry, I'm used to the acronyms many times that I forget that we have an audience here. So the national coordinating bodies around the world did an action about the Rana Plaza, what we saw here yesterday, which was very powerful also. And this one we do only on the 24th, we do such kind of actions that connects us on the 24th of April. Very, very important. And it's you know, we use it as a 24 hours of feminist action, where every national coordinating body can do an action only for 1 hour, between 12 and 1. And if we agree that you're doing it 12 and 1, that 12 and 1 is different everywhere. It's now at night in my country, you know, and it's afternoon here. So if we were to do an action around that time, it will not be 24 hours of action, because then there are quite a lot of other countries in between. But for 24 hours of action, 24th of April, that's how we were able to identify some of our Rana plazas around where we are on the 24th of April, and we not only use it for Rana Plaza, but also to help us to identify many others within locally, and people were able. And the third date.
And for folks who don't know about Rana Plaza, it was a building in Bangladesh
Yeah.
that actually collapsed, where garment workers were working in horrendous conditions, and there had been many warnings about the conditions of the building.
Yeah.
And a lot of those women and men that died, it was an absolute terrible tragedy, were actually workers that were making products for U.S. companies, clothing companies. And so there was a whole campaign, international campaign, that then GGJ was a part of. And we're really proud to say is that we actually participated as grassroots. That was our first action once we became members, and we participated in that 24-hour feminist action in different parts from New York all across to the Bay. And in the Bay, we were able to, we actually did a petition to those corporations, because many of them were US based, and actually demanding reparations for the families of all these folks. Many of those families couldn't even bury their loved ones. And so we were part of a campaign led by labor organizations and global organizations. And actually, the day we were handing the petition, the company decided we targeted the Children's Place, which is a clothing store. Children's Place decided to put in $3 million into the fund, and so they're like, we don't want an action. So that was one thing that we participated in this 24-hour feminist action.
And it's very important, because even for us, we were able to, when you hear Rana Plaza, and many people ask, why do we want to talk about what's happening in Asia, in Bangladesh? And we also have garments, garment factories here, and women are working under precarious conditions. And through that, we were also able to identify some transnational corporations which were actually doing so much within the country, and many women having issues with their health, and then they realized later on that some of the issues were actually because of kind of what that they were doing, and not knowing that it's actually wrong to work in such conditions, because everybody's looking for economic autonomy. So I think when we start connecting and localizing and bringing issues from, it's happening there, but it's also happening here. But if we can connect this and look at that and see where they intermarry, then we are able to identify.
That's right.
And the good thing is that when people start identifying and noting the problems through this, that they're able to work through. they're able to start strategizing around how do we get ourselves out of the mess. So that was very important. So sorry, before you go to your next question, is the third
No,
date?
the third date, I was going to come back to the
okay.
third date, yes.
Okay, so the third date, because the three very, very strategic dates, and they really help us. The third date is the 17th of October. In a few weeks, we'll be getting there. So it's, I'm actually going to expect to see all of you join GTJ and in action. Yeah. 17th of October. You know? Because 17th of October is actually International Day Against Poverty. And we localized it. In Kenya, we say it's International Day and, in support of every woman worker. Because we know that anybody who works towards economic empowerment of themselves, of the family, is a worker. Whether you pick papers, whether you sell potatoes outside your door, whether you wash the office, it doesn't matter. You are a worker. And you're working towards addressing issues of poverty. And so we look at all that and identify and appreciate and celebrate ourselves. And want to tell every woman who's out there, whatever work you're doing great. Nobody should tell you you're not doing anything. And tell women, nobody should ever bring you down because of the kind of work you do, but because you're doing the best and that is what it is. So we use this day to really look at the connection between our grassroots, our local realities with the international movement and what it is. So that's how we are able to wrap up all this and bring it up to the World March of Women standards of struggle, actually, I would call them, because they are struggles that many times we ignore. When your neighbor is hungry, you say, that's not my fault. I'm working, you're not working. We are building on that solidarity and we are bringing our voices together. So we try to connect and bring up that. And again, coming back to the 5 pillars of the World March of Women, which is peace, security, freedom, justice, and solidarity. Solidarity is actually the biggest pillar of the World March of Women. Yeah. And without solidarity, without international solidarity, we cannot even organize. Because we've been planning to organize. We must strategize. We must organize as women. We must change our lives for the better. How are we going to do it without solidarity?
Right. That's right. So with that, one of the things when you're talking about solidarity, one of the things that we've been very impressed with the World March of Women is seeing the strategy, and we've been learning about this in terms of some of the history of the feminist movement, is that oftentimes our movements are siloed, right? And so you have the feminists, and then the environmentalists, and the land defenders, and then the folks working on migrant justice, and a lot of times people are not actually cross-pollinating. And I think that the World March of Women, one of their main strategies has said not only organizing women at the grassroots and organizing internationally, but they've also chosen a strategy to say, we are not separatists. We are not separatists, and we're actually, the way we're going to dismantle patriarchy that's racialized and that's capitalist and imperialist and colonial, is that we have to actually have other social movements take up our demands. And I think that one of the things is that in the social reform process we've built and met, and in the struggles against the FTAA, the free trade trade agreements, against the WTO, a lot of movements come right into processes and into coordination. But one of the things is at the end of the day, we can all come back and just have our same politic or our same focus. And so I have been very inspired that of the strategic alliance between the World March of Women and La Via Campesina in particular. And for those folks that don't know La Via Campesina is the biggest, it's about 500 million families of peasants and campesinos, campesinas, land workers, that have come together as a social movement. And that La Via Campesina, it obviously organizes around land rights, around seed protection, around agroecology, around the defense of land. But a couple years ago, La Via Campesina took a really radical stance to say that their second kind of priority, and I remember this meeting, I heard about it, happened in Indonesia, and Indonesia was their international gathering. I forget, it was a couple years back.
2006.
2006, thank you for historical memory. And that they decided to take on a campaign to adopt the violence against women, in particular campesina and peasant women. So how did that happen? Because I think that just didn't happen magically. And so can you share how that happened?
Yeah. La Via Campesina is actually a mixed gender movement. And being a mixed gender movement, obviously priorities will not be as if it's a solely women's movement. The priorities will actually be women. And after the agreement in 2006, in 2007, where we first met, it was at the World March of Women International meeting, was discussed in there. It was a long discussion. Should we or should we not? And there was quite some, a movement is not a one jacket kind of. You'll always find people say, no, the people want is having, we cannot join, we cannot do this. And the people were seeing this a very good need why we need to join this. But finally there was an agreement because there was a lot of sense. And everybody was in agreement that the World March of Women can actually work in alliance with the organizations like movements, other social movements like Friends of the Earth and La Via Campesina. But this strategic one about La Via Campesina was very, it is something that has really helped because even La Via Campesina has been able to bring in feminist perspectives within their work and looking towards gender equality through within their work. And I think it's also a win-win situation for because even World March of Women has learned so much. Within World March of Women, we have women peasants, we have peasant farmers, we have women fisherfolks, we have small-scale food producers within the World March of Women space as well. And we could not just say that as a women's movement, we only discuss poverty and violence because this is what this movement started and this is why it was started. No, because all these issues are actually interlinked. It's like a web, one with the other. So they're all interlinked. And we've so far seen so much happening. And even World March of Women has taken up because a movement without an alternative is also a doomed movement. So the World March of Women, I will tell you here clearly and clearly that we are not a doomed movement because we also have our alternatives. Women cannot just sit and whine and say, oh, we're tired, anyway. But women must look for strategies. One of the strategies that the World March of Women actually picked, and it's our alternative, is the issue of food sovereignty and agroecology. And we can say that this was actually built out of the partnership of and the working in alliance with the social movements like La Via Campesina, yeah. And all this also went through, the Nyeleni story. Maybe I know because of time we can.
We have some time. What is the?
Okay.
Can you tell us?
Nyeleni is actually. It's funny when Nyeleni. When you Google Nyeleni, it will tell you everything about food sovereignty, about alternatives, about women, indigenous women working and seeking alternatives. And Nyeleni was a woman, a Malian woman, an old woman who was able to work and feed her family and, through her struggles. And World March of Women was part of the planning at the Nyeleni because of the interconnection and the working in alliances with the La Via Campesina. So I think it's very, very important that that we look at our issues wholesomely. And that is one thing that World March of Women decided to pick up as a strategy. It's wholesome, it's an all-round movement.
So we're going to pause. Those of you who are with us on the live stream, we're really excited that you're here. Please keep commenting. Please keep sharing the hashtag. We're here with our compañera Sophie Ogutu from the International Committee of the World March of Women, visiting here from Kenya. We are translating this call simultaneously, so I'm going to take a pause for the interpreters to change. So welcome, welcome. And we have a couple more questions, and then we're going to get some of the members and participants of the Feminist Organizing School to ask some questions. So we in this movement, you know, being part of the feminist movement, particularly in the United States, is a contradictory experience, right? We have a long legacy. We actually don't even know our history, right? When you talked about the International Women's Day, it was out of also another massacre that happened here in Chicago with the fire and the death of hundreds of immigrant garment workers. And when we think about the shirt waist and factory workers in Chicago. And part of what we've been, you know, there's been a lot of alienation from the word feminism and from a global feminist movement because it's been mainstream, or it's been academic, or it's been white-led. And I think that one of the things that we are trying to do is really honor, the long legacy and history of what we call here in the United States women of color, and then particularly Black feminist folks, and naming all the way from Sojourner Truth to Claudia Jones to Angela Davis and Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde, and the legacy of a lot of our theory and practice. And so when we have been in this task of saying, how do we reclaim feminisms from the grassroots? How do we create this new wave of feminism, right? This kind of 21st century wave of feminism that is not only is rooted in the grassroots, that does work around all of the intersections, right? Against the militarization of our borders and our communities and our world, right? Against the exploitation of our lands and natural resources, and the polluting of our waters and peoples, right? Against the economic injustices that people face in paid and unpaid work, against the issues of education and the not relevant education and that happens in our communities. So we work across many issues. We have evolved, I think, a framework of trying to push the gender binary because of a lot of our trans gender peoples and gender non-conforming folks and gender non-binary people that have pushed, right, the oppressive nature of the gender binary. And I think that we're beginning to see a new articulation about what's needed in this new political movement. And I wanted to ask you a question about this current moment. In this week, while we've been at the school, we've seen the horrendous response of, what we call 45 here, Trump and his regime, and in terms of what is happening in Puerto Rico. And we've seen a massacre of people in Las Vegas. We've seen that through this morning, the House began to attack women's reproductive rights on the right to abortion and control of our bodies. And so every day and almost every hour we're getting challenged by this. But I think that we also are understanding the system and root causes, right, of why all of this is happening, and even much more, it's almost like on steroids, right? Neoliberalism on steroids, patriarchy on steroids, white supremacy on steroids. And part of what we're trying to analyze is how are we going to fight back around this global right-wing surge, because it's not only happening in the United States, it's happening all over. I just came back from Europe and learning from what's happening in the UK, what's happening in Greece, what's happening in France, what's happening in Latin America with the coups and the attacks on our different socialist experiments, and you're seeing this right-wing surge. How is the International Council of the World March of Women understanding this political moment? And can you give us our marching orders?
Now, you get the marching orders through the calls. So we usually make lots of calls, call to action, depending on the kind of action that we really want to do. I think we are living in a very critical time right now. The context is complicated. In Africa also, it's very complicated. Like in my country where I come from, right now fascism is taking place, center stage, anarchy. There's a lot of things happening, and even besides what is happening, like this is what we are seeing, there's also a lot of militarism and so much happening. But women are organizing. Women cannot sit back and say because we don't have machinery, because we don't have the same voice as perpetrators, because we cannot fight this in this way. But this is all globalized right now. The issues are the same. And I can tell you that women are organizing and they continue to organize. And we have lots of success stories where women, even one bunch of women, sisters themselves, have taken part in addressing and responding to these issues. For instance, you mentioned the coup in Brazil, which happened a few years ago. We had lots of sisters also organizing and just going out there and saying, no, enough is enough, we cannot do this, this is what we want, this is, our country is getting to us and we need to speak. Because when a country scrambles, we all know what happens. So women actually take much more than the perpetrators. Because you're there, you want to protect your country, you want to protect your children, but sometimes you feel so powerless. But I think when women start thinking about this and acting together and bringing up the issue of solidarity that Ayala talked about, then it reminds us that this can actually be, it's actually able to, people are able to do something. And also looking at where we've had quite a lot of sisters working, because we respond as an international movement through our solidarity, we give calls, we try to highlight these stories as much as we can, and we share them so much so that everybody can be aware. Because you cannot act if you're not aware, you cannot do anything if you don't know what's happening. And we are lucky that we're able to even get, sometimes our media does not even tell us the real politics. But the people who are on the ground many times know, and they know what else can be done. So people sometimes come with ideas because you live there, and what the media doesn't tell you, then you have the power of grassroots women who are there, who know, I will share with you. And you'll be able to find solutions and ask, how do you want us to respond to this? If they have ideas, and this is what they bring in. And then that is where the international movement actually, through the support and through the solidarity and the power of our sisterhood and the spirit of feminism amongst us, we are able to address this issue. So another very good example that I may want to give is actually the Java women. That's right. Well, we saw women were so tired. And this is where they say even armed struggle can be an alternative for them. And a lot of women took up arms.
And so for folks who may not know, what Sophie's talking about is the Kurdish women's struggle, right? And in Kobani. And so if you can share a little bit more about what's their struggle about, and then how they're articulating that at this moment in actually deciding to pick up arms.
Yeah, because sometimes I think I look at the Rojava, the Kurdish history and the story about these foundations of women, which just made the women get tired. I look at it as maybe a boil that has been heating up, like slowly and slowly, but people say, no, this pain is too much. We cannot continue taking this. It's going down our throat, it's killing us. We have to speak. And when they speak up and they see that now there's quite a lot of people who can listen to them also, sometimes we don't need to take up arms. All we need to do as sisters is to just show, we are here, we are listening, tell us, you're not alone. And when people start speaking and they bring all that voice and they show them that they're not alone, then they get a lot of energies also. And the women were tired and they took up arms and they went and they saved Kobani, you know. And we cannot say that it's total freedom, because we are living in very, very delicate and terrible times again. So the struggle, women's struggles continue. They'll never end, you know. Like in 2010, one bunch of women also organizes through international meetings, international action, so which happens every 5 years. So we've had, we just did the 4th international action, but the 3rd international action was actually our first, as in Kenya, you know, as a baby, you know, like when you say that GGJ did their first action within the World March of Women on the 24th of April. These dates actually help us to remember, you know, the hitting point, the turning point, what really inspired you, and you moved on with the movement. So for us, I think also our success story will be like the third international action, and this is where the World March of Women Sisters in Spain agreed that we need to take our next action in a country where there is war. And many people say, why do you want to go to war? Why do you want to go to this country? It's our security. What about our security? What about our insurance? If something happens to us, what will it be like? But the spirit of feminism and sisterhood and solidarity actually reminds us that you're going there to give them solidarity. Right. There are people who are living in that country, in that situation, that way, every day. They don't have another place. They don't have a choice. Yeah, where will you go with your children? Where will you cannot leave your state. And so for us, it was very difficult, because being grassroots women with no funding at all, with nowhere we could go. But when we had that, this is how we struggle, this is what we need to do, because we are in solidarity. We had to sit down and strategize and think, how are we going to go to Congo? Congo is in Africa, but it's very far. It's the west of Africa, like down, very, very far. Like it took us 4 days to get there by bus, you know. And boat, right? No, we only took a bus. Oh, okay. Yeah, because that was the shortest route. Okay. That was the shortest route, and the boat was also very not, you know, if you want to choose the boat side, it's not going to be very safe, because then there are lots of militia groups, there are armed people, no buses allowed, there's curfew, you know, a certain time, and the sun is still shining, so there's a curfew, and people are saying, how are you going there, you know? And 40 women from Kenya sat down and mobilized, and they said, we're going to join the international movement in that struggle, because that is the spirit we want to carry along. And people moved around, and people made things, and people sold, and people, you know, and we were able to get enough money to get, and we also got international solidarity support from the sisters in Brazil, you know, and that's how it was. And going there, why did we go there? You know, it's because there are these wars. When we're looking at peace and denuclearization as one of the issues, in Congo there's been a lot of war. It's the forgotten war. People have forgotten about it because it's been long enough. The resources are too many, you know. So that war is not going to get soon over. And so everybody has shut off and they say enough is enough. No, we are not talking about it. But in real sense, what is happening on the ground is very serious. The military, even those who are sent there to stay there and support the women, they are actually taking advantage of the women. And people are using rape as a weapon of mass destruction. And the women are being raped, they're being killed, they're buried alive. You know, it's one of the very fertile countries in Africa, you know, with very fresh water and very fertile soil and very active women. But they are sleeping hungry because the situation cannot let them. They cannot go out there to work. So for us, that's looking at all this and mobilizing and organizing around these issues as women, as, you know, highlighting these stories that the media will not tell you about. We are our own media. That's what we tell the sisters. We are our own media. If you're being violated and you're my neighbor there, I'll not go quiet and say that's not my business, I'm not going to talk about it. Yeah, it's my business because you're my neighbor and you are suffering every day. So what should I do? I can't come there to fight back the person who's the partner, who's beating you up. But what can I do is to call another sister and say we need to do something about this. So that's the spirit of solidarity. If 2-3 people can do that, that's it. That's it. If all of us can go and say, hey, enough is enough, that's it. Yeah. But actually that spirit of solidarity and feminism and sisterhood is what we need to continue preaching and taking it and carrying it along all the time.
Yeah. And that is here. There's always folks snapping in the room. I'm going to take a break to actually pass the translator. A little bit of a pause as we shift to the next interpreter. And I'm going to take this opportunity to transition us. We want to hear from a couple of the members of the Feminist Organizing School that are going to come up one by one. They're going to introduce themselves, their organization, what movement they come out of, and they're going to ask you a question. That's Ask Sophie time. And we're going to, after the questions, there'll be one question that I ask Sophie, and we will be ending. But keep putting in your comments, support the Feminist Organizing School, support the work of the grassroots members that are here. It's important, and support the World March of Women. So first I am going to call up Janine. Who has come to here all the way from Black Mesa, and come on up.
Thank you, sister and sisters and brothers that are here with us at the training. It's been really enlightening, not only what you were sharing this morning, but also what we've been covering throughout the past couple of days in our school. And what's been reoccurringly coming up is how we apply this to our own work at home. And you know, I am co-founder of the Little Colorado River Watershed Chapters Association, which is a community-led land restoration program. And in that, we're having to reimagine not only how do we engage against these systems of capitalism, but also settler colonialism and patriarchy and all of the ways that it manifests itself in our daily lives and in our conditioning, but we're also having to be responsible for creating a new dialogue, new alternative, new framework for how we manifest the solutions that our communities need. And so one of the things that keeps coming up with our sisters here is that we're in an interesting time of collective transformation. And you know, as we're fighting against imperialism, colonization, capitalism, and patriarchy in all its forms, we are still confronting the fact that people in power, whether they're men or women, that serve the nation-state agenda, dominate the discourse over what solutions are viable or what solutions are legitimate. And one of the biggest and most important conversations happening at a local and an international level is this conversation around land tenureship and land ownership. And as Indigenous women and Indigenous peoples, we are fighting for reclaiming of collective ownership, of woman-led ownership, and woman-led resource management, and for reclaiming our power, and not only promoting food sovereignty, water security, agroecology, sustainable agroecology, but for protecting biological diversity in this era of climate change. So how can we use not only schools like this and like the curriculum that's being developed here, but also bodies like the Women's March to bring us together in these conversations and fight against the way land tenureship and the way that it's being measured and defined by a patriarchal and capital lens, so that we're not contributing to further assimilating our movements or our people into that lens, but we're dismantling it at its core.
Yeah. Wow. It's very true. Issues of land is very critical, because then without land, even water will not get space to be held. But I think looking at our realities right now as women, some women are able to own land. In some parts of in some parts of the world, women have the power to own the land. In some parts of the world, women are not even allowed to say that I can own land. Women are also treated as that property, as that land, which is property. So it's a struggle that I think we need to start opening up space more and discussing it more. How do we access it? How do we ensure that it's not just about access, but also that right to? How do we ensure that if I have a piece of land and I want to do my farming as an indigenous farmer, and I want to protect my family, I want to have my small kitchen garden, how do we ensure that that space is protected solely for you to be able to use it the way you are or the way you want to use it? I think in many aspects we've seen that in many countries we have land tenure policies. And these land tenure policies, some of them are actually supportive and others are very detrimental. Like I can tell you that, giving an example from, again, where I come from, a woman can own land. You can own land, yes. If you want to buy land, you can buy land, you can own it. But it's very difficult to get land that you're given the way, this is your land, it's been divided, this is yours from as a birthright or anything. But I think the policies that we have are very complicated. That even the grassroots women, those indigenous women who are working towards food sovereignty, who want to know, who know what to plant at what time and when, so that we can have the right food that we want to eat, cannot even understand those policies. There's so much that is hidden in the papers. So I think the first thing that we can do as grassroots women movement, these papers, many people don't even know that they exist. The policies, many people don't even know that they exist. And that is why we find that women can easily be thrown out of their ancestral lands. That's how we are seeing transnational corporations coming in and occupying the spaces of people, and many times supported by our own states. So we find that women are suffering. You don't know, because you don't know. You know you have a right, but where is it? How can you prove that you have that right? It is somewhere in a government office, it is somewhere at policies online, but who has the time to go there to look for those things and do it? So I think we have, as grassroots movements, as social movements, as grassroots women working towards food sovereignty, we have to start by first identifying these policies. Where are they? How are we going to break them down? How are we going to make sure that that woman who doesn't even know how to read understands that these policies are there to protect her? Yeah, so we really have a lot to start talking about and to start thinking around. So as movements, this is very, very important, because we are now at the age where we're also discussing critically issues of climate change, climate justice. And you cannot address climate change and justice without addressing land. You cannot address issues of land without actually talking about women. Yeah, so it has to start the other way around, because now I think we're starting there, but we're forgetting where to start from. So for us is to come back down and look at these VTTs, the military guidelines, what are there, what is in place, what protects, what supports, and what don't we agree with. Because so much is there which we don't even understand. So I think for us, we have to start speaking and opening these issues in our own spaces. From where we are at, what we are doing, and just the way we want to understand it, so that everybody else can understand and the women can be protected.
I absolutely agree. I think that one of the things I take away the most from here is everyone else's individual stories for how they're building this from the community level on up. I'm here with Black Mesa Water Coalition, and they've done a great job in trying to reimagine how we restore our clan mothers over and their authority over reclaiming our land and restoring our agricultural fields. And I think everyone here offers a little piece of that story. And so we've got to keep creating these spaces and acknowledge each other's work and rise together.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. So next up, I'm going to invite Saki from Cooperation Jackson, they've been doing incredible work building power on multiple levels. Saki.
Thanks. We are creative in our feminist economy ways, and we've been talking about fashion a lot. This week, you and we decided to do a t-shirt exchange. So that's one. And today is what I'm not wearing, one of my dope political statement t-shirts. But I'm just really happy to be able to be here and spend these days with you. With everyone here, like our organization, Cooperation Jackson, is in alliance, with Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, we're in the Climate Justice Alliance, we're in the City Alliance, like a lot of international work. And so, like organizations names I know, and a lot of the faces here I'm meeting for the first time, even when I know the other people that are in your organization that I've done work with. And the time and the space, I'm so happy to be here because I've been in spaces with you even for climate, for POP stuff. And we haven't gotten a chance to build and learn and know each other on a personal level. And so I'm really, really, really happy to have been able to do that with you, and then within everybody here. Last night, the bonfire and the sisterhood that I felt was just strengthening. And so, for everybody who's live streaming who doesn't know me, I'm Sophie Ogutu. I'm with Cooperation Jackson. I'm a member of Cooperation Jackson, and we are building a solidarity economy in Jackson, Mississippi. Right? We have a vision of a just transition into a sustainable community, a self-determined community, a community where we own the means of production, where we're producing goods and services in sustainable ways, where we have food sovereignty, we have ownership and control and democratically manage collectively land and our housing. And so all those different pieces for us come out of this radical Black tradition. And you started off talking about coming into become a feminist and calling yourself a feminist and how challenging that is in the African context. And so for us, in the African diaspora, understanding that we are in the United States, we live a settler colonial project, white supremacy is at the first, the first front, right? And oftentimes, unfortunately, is to either ignoring or outright saying there is no patriarchy. Yeah. Black men, African men can't be, patriarchs within this white supremacist system. So I'm really curious to know, and you already started speaking about it a little bit on the international level, how you're moving and building relationships and shifting and building allies across sectors. I'm wondering how that looks on a local level. Are there stories or lessons, whether successful or not, about how you're politically having to engage with African men and African men, centered organizations for labor or land? How have you seen any shifts? Have you had successful stories of being able to bridge that gap and widen the acceptance of the need for us, for our liberation to be so connected?
I think it's very important that we connect. Many times, luckily, we tell people we are not at war with men. But we are not going to sit there and say, because we are not at war with men, so we can sit down, just feed me up, it's okay. No. So I want to say that in Kenya, when we were doing our first political training, the feminist political training, we put a call in our NCBs. And we also have WhatsApp, like different groups of mixed social movements within the country. And so we put the call in case, so people can know what we're doing. And when we did that, we got a long list of many people wanting to be in the feminist training. Half of that list was from men. And we said, oh, why do men want to join? Why do they want to be part of that? And so many of them were saying, we want to be there because we want to understand. And they kept on telling us, the problem with you women is you lock yourself up in a room and discuss your issues there. And you talk about us and you don't tell us, and how do you want us to change? And we saw that was very challenging, And we said, so what do you want to do? Because this is a feminist political training. We want women to feel very safe in this space. We are opening up a space for the women to speak out everything that they've been holding, because it's a feminist space. And it was like, very long. People want to know, no, this is not right, this is not good. And I said, we want to know how we can join the movement. Because a whole bunch of women actually says very well, who are we? We are connected grassroots, women organizations, groups, individuals, and people who are working towards elimination of poverty, looking at root causes of poverty, and elimination of violence against women. And it is also connecting men, in a way, through our statements. And they use the same statements to go back and ask, when you are challenging, you say, no, you cannot be part of this because then this is a feminist movement. We are discussing it as this. So for us, it was very, very difficult. And many of them say, we want to be part of this, we want to be part of the team, we want to be in the committee, we want to be in the organizing. And because we do a lot of activities as in Kenya, and we actually ended up having like 4 men helping us around within the space, helping to transport and get, because they wanted to know exactly what are you doing. So for us, I think when you're talking about that and we say that the space is opening, because we talked about La Via Campesina and the alliance that the World Watch of Women is working towards, and it's very important that that now we can see a lot of feminist perspectives and women's strength, and even the men who are within the Via Campesina actually appreciate and respect the work that the women are doing, and they get there, there's very mutual respect, but World Watch of Women remains a women's movement. It remains a women's movement. The only thing that I think we can work in very closely is the issues are very diverse, and they're very many. And there's some places where we cannot avoid. We're working with social movements, allied social movements, and they have to be very strategic. If we're talking about issues of which are very much related with our changing world, then I think it's still okay to do it, and it's still very much in line to walk away with them. And I might say that proudly, because of the World March of Women in Africa, that La Via Campesina had a chapter board in Kenya. So and it's actually a mixed social movement, and it's also, the organization is very mixed, and most of them are men. But we also work closely because of what ties us internationally. So I think, so it's really about how we look at things. It's not like now, okay, the space is open, okay, you can walk in, you can come, and okay, it doesn't matter, you can feel comfort, feel at home, no.
So it sounds like the 4 men, you all put them to work. So their ability to support was helping with transportation and logistics and stuff, and supporting, but not necessarily being in the space where stories are being shared and decisions are being made, right? And so, I think that's dope.
That's not fun at
have
all.
stories of your role is to take notes, when typically that's not what the men do, right? And how we share those things in the places and bodies that are where we're all a part of the decision-making process.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think it's really important for us to have, maintain, and be specific and be clear about why we have the organization's particular work groups, even if it's a small organization, not a national organization, where women's leadership really you start to see just how sneaky patriarchy is when you open that space up to having men be present, even if they support women's leadership, if the intent of the organization is really, really, really about women. And so I think that's important. And that's where the pushback comes. It's like, well, how are we supposed to support if we can't be a part of? And it's like, you don't have to be a part of everything. Just like you tell white people, you don't have to be a part of everything, or that you can't because just your presence makes what we're trying, our agenda silenced. And so the political education piece of it for us, while for Cooperation Jackson at least, being mostly gendered, we have members who are queer. It's also multinational. So even though Black leadership is centered, we actually have members who are multinational, but we are very clear and specific around spaces and places for the sections of the organization to get together. And so having those women-only spaces are important. And for us, the political education piece is important. That is for everyone. And so we're going to be having a really challenging time dealing and grappling with what we've been learning here in this space for 4 days in a PE series back at home. And I'm really excited to be able to be building and sharing experiences and then taking some tools back, like even the assessment tool that got used earlier about where you're at with your gender analysis, back to Jackson. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to make it clear is that it is very, very important to have safe spaces for women to strategize, and that was the reason why.
Exactly.
So we have one more question. From our compañera Rosa, all the way from East Los Angeles Community Corporation. And she is going to speak in Spanish, and so we have our fabulous interpreter Catalina, who is going to be interpreting.
Buenas tardes. Creo que por fin se me da la oportunidad de estar en conexión contigo, ya que vamos a estar entendiendo y tener una conversación en mi lengua y tú en tu lengua.
So good afternoon. I am very thankful to finally have the opportunity to connect with you and be able to have a conversation in my language and you in your language.
Yo vengo de Los Ángeles, de una organización que se llama Mesa Community Corporation, que hace varios trabajos, pero el departamento donde yo trabajo tiene dos campañas, que es Derecho a la Tierra y Lucha por Vivienda Económica. Y en la campaña donde yo me desarrollo, hago un trabajo, es organizar a vendedores ambulantes en Los Ángeles.
So I come from Los Angeles. I work for an organization called East LA Community Corporation. And in our organization, we do different work. We have different departments and two campaigns. One is for the right to our land, and the other one is for accessible housing. And I'm working right now in a campaign to organize street vendors.
Me toca organizar a vendedores. Los vendedores más que nada luchan por el derecho a la tierra, también luchan por el trabajo invisible y también por una economía no reconocida.
So I'm organizing with street vendors, And we are organizing with workers that are fighting for the right to their land, to also visibilize their invisible work, and also work that is not recognized.
Me siento muy orgullosa de estar en esta campaña porque más del 80% de los vendedores ambulantes son mujeres inmigrantes, madres solteras, madres que han podido sacar a sus hijos adelante en la educación y son mujeres poderosas.
I am very proud of being part of this campaign because 80% of street vendors are women. They're immigrant women, they're single mothers, they're mothers that have brought their children and they're supporting their education. And these are powerful women.
Y más que nada me inspira cuando escucho lo que es la Marcha Mundial de la Mujer y me identifico, pero también viene mi pregunta.
And I am inspired more than anything when I hear about the Women's March. And that's where I identify myself. Also, I identify myself with that as well, but that's where my question comes in.
Como movimientos sociales viviendo dentro del vientre de la bestia, que son liderados por gente más impactada como las mujeres de base, gente de género no conformista, indígenas, inmigrantes, comunidad negra. ¿Cómo puede ser un ejemplo de solidaridad y compromiso internacional con movimientos en otras partes del mundo?
So, social movements that are here in the belly of the beast, that are being led by people, by women, by the grassroots here, by people that are gender non-conforming, indigenous people, immigrant, Black people. How can we be in solidarity and how can we commit to being solidarity with the international social movement?
Well, great question. Thank you very much. As like we had said earlier, the national coordinating body in the United States here is a GGJ. And through GGJ, you're able to even bring that grassroots woman, the vendor in the space. When you connect, because it's about connecting, and we need to organize ourselves. Otherwise, if women do not organize themselves, we just join without being organized, then we give more room for being powerless. So what we do is we are a very organized movement, and so we organize in national coordinating bodies, so that even the last voice of the woman that we think cannot be reached can be reached, and her voice can be brought. So I think it's very good that all those groups can get in touch with GGJ, and through GGJ they can take part and they'll know anything that happens within the World Management space. When we make the calls, when they want solidarity, when there's solidarity out there, then we can all bring the voices together because we are a diverse women's movement.
Creo que nos dejas un buen compromiso y un buen trabajo que hacer. Y sería muy bueno que también puedas dirigirte a las personas que nos estén mirando y que nos están escuchando, cuál es el compromiso a seguir.
So you leave us with a really important commitment and also really important work for us to do. And I hope that you can also talk to those that are listening and are watching right now and let us know what's the commitment we need to make right now.
We've been actually working. I know, we've been working a lot. Women have been working for very many years. And the struggles have been, we've gone through the pillars and looking at feminism as that onion. We are not saying that the end stops with one call. There's going to be so many calls. Right now, we are actually standing in solidarity with the many people who died here recently, just before we started our. It's something that is very dear to us. Losing one life, for women is one too many. So for us, these calls will be very many. And the only thing that I want to tell each one of us is that we have to commit from ourselves. That whenever we make that call, wherever we need that solidarity, wherever GGJ speaks to us on behalf of, as the coordinating body here, and we want the voices of all the women sitting around here, then your voices will be heard. That's the commitment that we really, really, really want to take out. And we are making the commitment that we are a solidarity movement. And so for us, it is very, very important that we take the voices. So, yeah.
Okay, gracias.
So thank you so much to the folks that came and shared about their organizing work and shared some of the deep political questions, right, that we're facing, not only in our communities and what we're hearing and what we've been learning, but also internationally. And I think that part of what, for me, is really inspiring is that you are in solidarity with us now. Because right now the U.S. is facing one of the biggest challenges, I think, of our lifetime and for the world and humanity, where you have Trump and his regime in power and using everything to destroy and dismantle every gain that all of our social movements have made, to destroy and dismantle any integrity or dignity that people have. And that at this moment, we are also calling on international solidarity as we grow our resistance and as we continue our resistance that started before Trump, but also is going to need to be so much more than that. And one of the things, Sophie, as we're ending this live stream and we're ending this part of the session, so for those of you watching, this is part of our political education training, and we're going to keep deepening now this afternoon in terms of continuing to, how do we strengthen the organizing with a feminist lens, is being able to say, do you have any advice for us? As tomorrow we end our training with direct action training, shout out to Ruckus, who's going to come and do a direct action training, because our hope is to be part of this mass, militant, global women's movement and live up to the expectations that I think were needed. And so we're going to do that. But what advice do you have for the participants in this room, for the folks seeing this video through live stream, and for the people who will see this video after? So what is your advice?
I'm going to leave you with how many?
3.
I'm leaving you with 3 advices. 1 is organize. 2, organize. 3, organize.
For being with us, for sharing her wisdom. And I'm going to call everybody up here as we close out this live stream with the World March of Women's chant. So everybody stand up so folks out there can see us.
¡Seguiremos de la marcha!
Hasta que